Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get into it.
Most motorists are well aware of the fact that cars do not particularly like contact with water. Therefore, drivers try to avoid passing through deep puddles in every possible way, even in urban conditions. SUVs are more passable in this respect. They are able to pass quite heavy sections of off-road, ford rivers, and sometimes almost to the windshield to be submerged underwater. But regardless of the vehicle you are driving, you should never forget about the phenomenon of engine water hammer. This is an extremely dangerous thing that can happen not only off-road when trying to force a river or lake. This happens in ordinary urban conditions, when there is a heavy downpour or the car tries to drive through a deep puddle. What it is? Let's start with the very concept of engine hydrostroke and how it occurs. In the normal mode of operation of the power plant, a fuel air mixture enters the working cylinders. The pistons compress it. From the compression or candle it ignites. The resulting force pushes the piston back, and so it is repeated many times. Such a phenomenon makes it possible to propel a vehicle. But now it is necessary to understand what this very hydrostroke of the engine means. It occurs when, in addition to fuel and air, there is also water in the cylinder. The cycles are not interrupted, that there is compression and ignition. The only and the most important problem is that water, unlike the fuel-air mixture, actually gas, is practically incompressible. When the amount of water is small, nothing bad usually happens. The moisture evaporates quickly due to the high temperature. But when the amount of water increases and the piston is at its top dead center, problems start to occur. The connecting rod becomes deformed and other destructive processes occur. Since water is virtually uncompressible, the piston moves upward during the compression stroke, but it rests against a layer of water. This prevents the piston from completely completing the stroke and reaching the upper point of its movement. The cycle does not end, and a phenomenon called hydrostroke occurs. Hydro impacts can cause extremely serious and dangerous damage to engine components. The first to suffer is mainly the connecting rod. This happens because the connecting rod is located between the piston, which is inert by the water, and the crankshaft, which rotates by inertia. This causes the connecting rod to deform. It bends because it is effectively sandwiched between the two elements. It's like a hammer and anvil. Based on all of the above, hydrostroke can be called the ingress of water into the piston space inside the combustion chamber. Because of this, an active destructive process begins, in which the engine elements can bend and deform. The connecting rods and pistons suffer, and cracks form in the cylinders. All this results in expensive repairs. And sometimes, if you do not make the right decision in time and continue to drive on a damaged motor, you need a complete replacement of the power plant. And this is an extremely impressive financial outlay. Causes. Motorists believe that the problem of hydrostroke is relevant only for those who have recently gotten behind the wheel. As if only beginners make such mistakes, and this will never happen to experienced drivers. But this is a big misconception. No one is fully insured against hydrostroke, because those who have spent many years behind the wheel without any serious accidents. And mistakes are faced with this phenomenon. It is the great experience that often plays a cruel joke with a motorist. He is sure that he knows how to do everything, and therefore he really forgets elementary things. Plus, transfer from one car to another, which differed in their characteristics and capabilities, leads to making trivial mistakes. There are three main reasons that lead to hydrostroke of the power plant. Deep puddles. If the driver often likes to drive at high speed through a fairly deep puddle, the probability of encountering a hydrostroke increases significantly. This is due to the fact that because of the deep puddle, water easily penetrates into the air filter. The combustion chamber is very close to the air filter. After the filter, there are practically no obstacles on the way to the combustion chamber. Water obstacles. Off-road vehicle owners are not the only ones who try to overcome various water obstacles. Even when a body of water, river, or lake seems shallow, it is worth risking only if you are fully confident in your car. Otherwise, the water level reaches the air intakes, the liquid follows the air filter, and from there it is already directed to the Piston system of the power plant. Engine malfunctions. Even on a completely sunny day, in the absence of puddles and water obstacles, water can appear in the cylinders. This can be explained by cracks and deformations of the cylinder head gasket. If this happens, the role of water is coolant, which seeps through the damaged gasket. When the hydrostroke is caused precisely by a violation of the integrity of the engine structure, it is often manifested when starting the engine. It is possible to eliminate these factors, but not all drivers carefully monitor the condition of the engine, and sometimes simply forget about the need to exercise caution when trying to overcome some puddles or other water obstacles. Characteristic signs. Drivers should also be aware of how to identify hydrostroke. There is no definite single sign here. Such a phenomenon is determined by several characteristic symptoms. Water in the manifold. The primary signs of a hydrostroke that has occurred in the engine are in the form of water. It is water that gets into the fuel in the combustion chamber of a gasoline or diesel engine, interferes with the normal completion of the cycle. If there is additionally water in gasoline and air in a sufficiently large amount, hydrostroke is inevitable. And to begin with, it is necessary to look for the presence of traces of moisture on the intake manifold. Moreover, such symptoms are determined in the first days. Otherwise, all the water will evaporate, and it will be unclear whether the problem is really in it. Here it is not difficult to figure out how to determine the hydrostroke in the engine system. If there is water, then the diagnosis is correct. Air filter. Another option of how to find out whether there was such a dangerous hydrostroke in the engine. Check the manifold because of the design features of the engine is not always possible. Therefore, it is worth looking at the air filter. It is not difficult to examine it even in the field. If it is deformed, filtering paper elements are wet. Wet streaks are visible. These are characteristic signs of impact. As a result of the impact, the connecting rod is deformed and the piston is no longer able to reach the upper point. This phenomenon will cause the soot streak to increase. This occurs in proportion to the deformation of the connecting rod itself. Because of the deformation, the warped connecting rod is not able to create a uniform movement for the piston. Therefore, the piston is stronger on one side and weaker on the other. Hence the unevenness of the fouling. Also signs that there was a hydrostroke of the engine, manifested in the form of deformation of the piston itself. To assess the condition of the motor, it is worth looking at the presence of abrasions in those places where the piston is in contact with the cylinder, or rather its walls. If there was a blow with further deformation, the traces of contact will go obliquely, not in a straight line, as it happens when the elements work properly. By no means always water penetrates only one cylinder. Therefore, sometimes only one connecting rod breaks, and in the other cylinders these elements are only deformed, bent. Most often the fracture occurs in the upper part of the connecting rod. Not all bends are easy to notice. It is necessary to look more carefully. Another option for realizing that a dangerous hydrostroke has occurred in the engine. But for this you have to remove the cylinder head. There is a significant difference in the color of the combustion chambers. One becomes blacker or darker against the background of the others. The edges of the connecting rod liners may show signs of scuffing, explained by the uneven distribution of the load. Read also, failures in the engine when squeezing the gas. Why arise and how to eliminate to better understand the essence of what is happening. Sometimes it is better to send the car for diagnosis in a car service. Only to go on your own is not recommended. For these purposes, it is worth contacting a towing service. Otherwise, you risk permanently disabling the engine. The considered symptoms are rarely found one by one. Most often it is a combination of several characteristic signs. When they are detected, you can accurately and confidently declare that a dangerous hydrostroke has occurred in the engine of your car. Actions in case of hydrostroke. Given the potential threat of such a phenomenon, motorists are actively interested in what to do and how to act correctly in case of hydrostroke of their engine. On this account, experts and simply experienced drivers give several useful recommendations. Under no circumstances should you attempt to start the engine again. Even if your car is in the way of other road users, any attempt to start it could potentially be destructive and even more serious. Because of this, the golden rule is to not start the engine after a blowout. Next, you need to find the air filter on your car and open it. If, when dismantled, water is found in the filter, your suspicions about a possible hydrostroke are confirmed. The filters should be dried, and the housing should be thoroughly wiped dry. Any residual water must be removed. If we are talking about a car with a gasoline engine, then you need to remove the spark plugs and try to crank the crankshaft by hand. In the process of cranking, there is a feeling of counterweights clinging to the pistons, or the pistons begin to wedge. If this happens, the car will definitely not be able to drive on its own. When there are no hooks and nothing is caught during cranking, the deformation is insignificant. In theory, it is possible to drive the car on its own, but even in this situation it is better to call a tow truck. After the manipulations, when there are no obvious signs of deformation and breakage, try cranking the engine with the starter. If knocking and extraneous sounds are heard, stop trying and stop the engine. Do not try to start it again. When everything is within normal limits, i.e., the water hammer has not caused serious damage, you can start the engine and go to the car service. It does not matter how serious the shock is. It always requires an obligatory visit to a workshop or self-repair if the driver is well-versed in the relevant repair work. Both strong and weak impacts are often accompanied by certain deformations and minor breakages. Even with a minor impact, the damage can be cumulative. At first, everything will work well and stable, but gradually the situation will begin to deteriorate, the engine will fail, and a large sum of money will be needed for its restoration. It is much better to check everything at once, adjust the motor design, change the damaged elements, and continue to operate your vehicle, but without making the same mistakes. Potential consequences. The severity of the consequences of an engine hydrostroke depends directly on the actions of the motorist. Some people get by with a bent valve or connecting rod. If the piston is bent, the task of restoration becomes more serious, because the bent piston is not so easy to return to the initial working condition. The fact is that hydrostroke not only bends connecting rods, but also deforms other elements. Whether the shock will be treated with minor damage, or will have to give the motor for major repairs, depends on the literacy of the driver and the correct actions taken by him. Read also, why can the engine can trot? Search for possible causes. The most serious consequences are faced by those who do not turn off the engine after the impact. He continues to work, which leads to the aggravation of the problem and to new deformations. Most often such an action ends in major repairs. To understand the dangers of hydrostroke, it is necessary to consider a few of the most common consequences. The connecting rod fails. Cracks form in the liner, a hole in the cylinder block, deformation of the piston. A connecting rod that is bent due to strong impacts from both sides usually shows itself in two ways. If the impact has been severe, the so-called friendship arm appears immediately. This is the situation when the damaged connecting rod punches a hole in the block and comes out. The second variant is similar to the first, that is, the block is also punctured by the connecting rod. But it happens after several hundred, and sometimes thousands of kilometers, because the slightly damaged element accumulates fatigue. Eventually, the connecting rod still fails. Sometimes, even experienced mechanics cannot immediately replace a minor change in geometry. Therefore, often motorists who have encountered a hydrostroke are recommended to immediately replace the probably damaged connecting rod. But a stalled engine is not always the result of a water hammer. Sometimes this happens if water from a puddle or pond gets on the motor sensor or affects the electrical wiring. Here you can wait a little to let the water residue drain off and dry out well. If after that the car starts easily without any problems, it is not a matter of water hammer. Therefore, you can continue driving at your own pace. But when this happens all the time, it is strongly recommended to check the condition of the electrical wiring and change the sensor as necessary. When hydrostroke is the culprit, it is strongly advised not to continue driving. Even simple attempts to restart the engine can result in costly repairs. Stop, call a tow truck service, and ask them to take your vehicle to a service center. There, experts will be able to visually assess the damage caused by the water hammer and how much it will cost to repair. How to prevent water hammer. It is absolutely natural and logical to be interested in how to avoid engine hydrostroke. Everyone perfectly understands how unpleasant a phenomenon this hydraulic shock is, and to what consequences it can lead. The driver has a real opportunity to protect himself from such situations as much as possible. To minimize the probability of personally encountering the phenomenon of engine hydrostroke, you should take into account a few fairly simple rules. Maximum size of the Ford. Each vehicle has its own limitations as to how deep it can go into the water. On many off-road vehicles, this is prescribed as a separate item of technical specifications, but it is also found on passenger cars. The point is not to immerse the air filter in water. Situation assessment. The driver is driving on a road and sees a puddle, ford, or other water obstruction ahead. If there is the slightest opportunity to avoid driving through this place, you should take it. Going around the side of the road or finding another road is much better than dealing with the consequences of a hydraulic shock. If there is no other way, you should force the river with extreme caution. At minimum speed. When the driver sees that the car is sinking more than the permissible level, reverse. It is very dangerous to drive further. Snorkel. This is one of the most effective items for preventing hydraulic shocks. Snorkels are special spigots that are installed on cars. It is mostly done on SUVs so that the engine sucks air from as high a point as possible. This allows you to overcome even the deepest water obstacles without fear. Water will not get into the cylinders due to the installed snorkel. Natural disasters. If a heavy downpour hits your community, rivers start to overflow, and there is severe waterlogging, it is best not to operate your vehicle in such conditions. If you find yourself in such a situation, when there is no other way out, try to choose roads that pass through uplands. In any lowland, water can accumulate for several minutes. Where recently the car was driving calmly through a small puddle, soon cars start to float. When overcoming water, do not accelerate hard. If the water starts to flood the hood, you risk stalling and becoming a hostage to the elements. Check the air ducts. This should be done periodically, regardless of road conditions, precipitation, or other factors. You never know when you'll be faced with the need to overcome a water obstacle. When doing so, you need to make sure there is no damage to the ducts. Air filter. Drivers are advised to periodically check its condition, as well as to replace it in time. It has happened many times that the filter has been punctured and cracked as a result of prolonged use, or due to an aggressive manner of driving. It will be enough to drive in the rain, so that water will penetrate through these holes in the filter and the engine will face a hydraulic shock. Objectively assessing the situation, it is safe to say that hydraulic shocks are extremely dangerous phenomena that can cause serious and costly damage. It does not matter how strong or weak the hydraulic shock itself was. In almost every situation, repairs to the propulsion system are required later on, and it is much better when such repair work falls on the shoulders of competent professionals. In conclusion, understanding the causes of engine hydrostroke is crucial for any vehicle owner. By recognizing the risks associated with driving through deep water, maintaining proper air intake systems, and ensuring regular engine checks, you can significantly reduce the likelihood of this potentially damaging issue. Remember, prevention is always better than cure. Stay informed, stay cautious, and keep your engine running smoothly. Thank you for watching, and drive safely.